Digital 410 proudly presents the What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast with your hosts Don Abernathy, Jeff Copsetta, and Henry Sledge.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast, your favorite World War II-based podcast, and we're back live once again, joined as always by Jeff Copsetta, and if things come to fruition here momentarily, we will be joined by guest host Mr. Dennis Blocker II. That's the type of name you can't put on a mailbox in front of a shack. That's a name destined for success right there. Jeff, how are you doing tonight, sir?
Good. How are you?
You know, I used to say, because my grandfather's name was Donald Preston Abernathy II, but then he skipped the generation with my father, which really messed things up because I could have been the fourth, and the name Donald Preston Abernathy IV is not a name that you can put on a mailbox in front of a shack. I was so close to destiny, but fell short one generation, so I started all over again with just Donald Preston Abernathy I. How are you? It's cold here in Florida.
Yeah, so you're wearing a jacket, and I mean, we're kind of enjoying. I mean, it feels like December at least, right? The Christmas lights are up, Christmas trees are going, and you don't want it to be 70 degrees, and it was the other day, but we're hitting the 50s and 30s at night, so I like it. For this time of year, this is how it should be.
You know, it's so funny because I grew up in Ohio and Kentucky, and growing up as a kid, you know, when it's -4 at the bus stop all year, then it makes its way up to 50. Ooh, that's shorts weather. And so you'd be out the bus stop in the morning at 55 in shorts. It's currently 55 degrees here in Cape Coral. I got a wool-lined 41 jacket on, a T-shirt. There is a window behind me. The windows are actually open in my house, so we don't have the heat on. Thank gosh for that. But yeah, we're just trucking right along, and heads up, I know it's hard to download every episode and listen to it in real time, but the time is on the clock and the clock is on the time for the winner of the first Patreon prize pick winner, which we did at the end of November, and that was Joe Schwartz. You won the first print that we're giving away. I sent a message to you on Patreon, so if you haven't done so, log in your Patreon account. I just need to know that you're actively still around and that I have the correct address, because I don't want to send this wonderful print to whatever random lucky guy moved into the apartment after you. So simply just reach out to us on Patreon, send us a message, say, hey, I'm here, I'm alive, here's my address, and we'll send it out to you just in time for probably New Year's Day. If you guys didn't win, don't worry. We're going to do another drawing. Unofficially, I think we're going to shoot for maybe beginning of February, because December's half over. We want to give people time to sign up. And our next print is another one from donated by Mr. Henry Sledge. This one too is from the Valor Studios. It's entitled Off the Line. It's by Gil Cohen. The description of this one, it is September 25th, 1944, as the Marines of King Company K-35 file past Peleliu Airfield 10 days after landing on the island's bloody beaches. They enjoy a brief reprieve from the fighting and the heat. In the days prior, they helped capture this very landing strip, the campaign's main objective. And just a quick preview, we will take a nice photo like we did the last one and post it on all our social media. This is very reminiscent of the scene in the series where you see them all walking down the line and they're beaten and worn and their uniforms are all tattered and torn. A very iconic image. You can now have your very own print from Valor Studios. Go out and get it put in a nice frame and hang it up in your library, your room, wherever you keep all your World War II stuff, the living room, if your wife will let you. It's a very beautiful print. And that can be yours. All you have to do, sign up for Patreon. Head over to WTSPWorldWar2.com. When you go there, you'll see a red Patreon link in the corner, or orange if you're not colorblind like me. Click on that, sign up. Choose any one of the three plans. Just got to be a red active subscriber. You can choose the $1.50 plan, the $3.50, or the $7.50. Jeff had forgotten. I know he's aware because we talk about it all the time, but he was surprised. Yes, if you sign up, maybe I don't talk about it enough, but the rule's always been in place, and I've given out a handful of these. If you sign up for the $7.50 month plan after your second month, I will reach out to you via Patreon. Any giveaways, any prizes, anything we do through Patreon, communication will be through Patreon. It's our only way to truly identify you as the member. But yeah, I will reach out to you through Patreon, send you a link to our store, say, hey, pick a shirt, pick a color, pick a size, let me know what it is and send me your address, and we'll get those ordered and send that out to you. So if you want a free t-shirt after month number 2, it's kind of our way of thanking you as being the top tier subscriber. Which, to be honest with you, I've seen some of the top tier subscribing prices on a lot of other Patreon pages, and I don't feel guilty about $7.50. I was watching this YouTube channel, guys like, our top tier $500 a month. I'm like, what? Okay, $7.50, we're doing good. So yeah, $7.50 a month. After month 2, we'll get you a free shirt. But you can sign up for a $1 a month plan, and you'll be entered in. And as we did this time, at the beginning of February, we'll print out all the names, as long as you're an active subscriber, and we'll dice them up, and we'll pick away. Jeff and I are trying to, because we want to stay the nice guy. We don't want to be, someone's mad because we didn't choose their name. So we're going to pick some random poor person in our environment, make them do the drawing. So we're innocent. They will do the drawing of the name, and then we'll reach out to you guys and help you out. Jeff has a friend who sent us some very cool stuff, and we have a limited supply of a certain item, which I thought maybe we could use as a feeler, see what the interest are, and if they sell, then we'll get some more made on a mass scale. But there's no reason to order boxes of stuff if they're just going to sit around. So, Jeff, do you have one handy? If not, I do. You want to describe what we're looking at here?
Yeah, there you go. So it's not only a good buddy of mine, but a brother in arms. It was somebody I served with Fox Calf years and years ago. He was a young PFC when I remember him, but now he's a retired sergeant first class out of the Army, retired as a recruiter in the San Antonio area, got into some laser engraving. And so like Don's up there, it's about the size of a credit card. Mm-hmm. Nice thin metal, powder coated, kind of, it's hard to scratch. I mean, that's scratch resistant, I guess. I mean,
yeah, hypothetically.
Really, yeah, it's really slick. So it's just a really cool bottle opener with our logo on it, with WTSP, with the 5-year logo on it. And he just kind of donated a bunch to us and said, "Hey, man, here you go." And just kind of a gift to the podcast, and see what we can do with them. And
these are perfect for camping, fishing. Obviously, you're probably not going to put a steel can opener in your wallet and sit on it because it's going to hurt. But these are like perfect for like camping, fishing, anywhere. Not only for beer bottles, but for like Mexican Cokes, the Mexican Fanta, a lot of the stuff that's not twist off, you need a bottle cap for. How many times you've gone out and got tacos and get that bottle and you walk out like, oh, is there a picnic table I can smack the edge of this thing on? We got a lot. I can't tell you how many gas stations I've gone to and bought the Coke in the non-twist off bottle cap, and the gas station doesn't have a bottle opener. So you're outside looking for something to smack it on. No one smokes anymore, so it's not like you got a lighter to pull out of your pocket. So throw one of these in your glove box or in your tackle box or your camping bag. So when you and the family are out, or you and friends are out, and you got a beer around the fire, or once again a glass bottle without a twist off, Bob's your uncle. Perfect. And so we're going to put those up on the website here in about a weekish or so. And we have a limited edition. We're going to put them up there, make them available for purchase, and go from there. And once again, if we sell out of them, then we'll consider ordering more. While we're waiting on our guest, Dennis, to sign in, let's do a mail call. This is almost, it's getting that time of year again, and this happens occasionally. It's always a surprise when it does. But we have a mail call that includes more. So, Jeff, if you don't mind hitting up that mail call.
Yeah, so it says here, "Hi, Don. I'm sending you guys a package from Pearl Harbor. Just confirming new mail address," and I won't read that out loud. But she was confirming Don's mailing address and just checking, because I thought last year I sent it to Del Prado or something like that.
Yeah, we moved our office address for the Digital 410. So the address that is on our website, which is the address she was verifying, is in fact the current address.
Perfect. So says here, "Walking to local Honolulu post office now. Hope the address is correct. Thank you, Miss Rona Bushbaum." And is that the package?
Yeah, the package showed up today, and now I'm getting warm, so I'm going to take my M41 off. So we got the package here. And inside the package, I didn't open up these guys, but I did open up the envelope because I wanted to know what I was reading before I read it on the air. Nice There's something nice about a handwritten correspondence, especially in the world of email. Perfect timing. 1 second. Dennis Blocker is going to join us as we're reading this. Handwritten correspondence, which I can't open. Don, Jeff, and Henry. Yesterday, I attended the 82nd commemoration of the December 7th attack held at Pearl Harbor National Memorial here in Hawaii. This year's theme was Legacy of Hope. While there, I picked up a little something for Christmas. Nothing fancy, just a small appreciation for your podcast. Don, I do not have Jeff and Henry's mailing addresses. Can you please forward these packages along with the next time you're sending something their way? Happily do so. Jeff, my son and I visited the National Museum of the Pacific War in June and made a detour stop to the Highlands Lake Squadron. A nice guy named Dave, took us around and let us board the Texas Zephyr C-47. Wow. The collection of World War II aircraft on display is great. With some really unique finds. Nice work. Henry, keep on plugging away at the book. Can't be easy. I know you want to get it done just right. Sign me up to purchase a copy when it is released. Sincerely, Rona. So thanks so much. And check us out. Okay, so I'm just going to open one of these. So we got one with my name on it, one with your name on it, and one with Henry's. I'm not going to make any assumptions. I'm going to assume they're all the same, but I'm not going to take it upon myself to open up your gift. So I'm going to open up the one that has my name on it and see what's in this bad boy. We got us the Pearl
While
Harbor.
we're waiting on that, welcome, Dennis.
Welcome, Dennis. How you doing, fella?
Yeah.
Welcome to
all right.
Mail Call. So we got ourselves a nice Pacific Historic Parks bag. And inside... Oh, that's very cool. That's awesome. The USS.
What is it?
USS Arizona. Check that out.
Oh,
It's USS Arizona BB-39 in port.
beautiful.
That is
It's a Christmas tree ornament. Let's see, Christmas was a special time for sailors aboard USS Arizona. Since 1916 through 1940, the celebration of the joyous event was something that the officers and crews prepared for and celebrated. As the clouds of the war gathered in the Pacific, many of the sailors would prepare Christmas cards and gifts for their loved ones on the mainland. But Christmas never happened aboard the Arizona in 1941. She was lost in the opening moments of the attack on Pearl Harbor. For those who got their cards and gifts anyway, these were the last tactile memories of the families and their loved ones. This ornament is a gesture of that Christmas remembrance for all the fallen crew and of a grateful nation. So that's very cool. And then she has included multiple other artifacts from the museum. Dennis, sir, how are you doing, friend? And I'll get this. I'll get yours and Henry's mailed out to you here this week.
doing good. It's good to be with you guys. It's been a little bit.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, thank you for the invite.
Yeah, absolutely. We love and we miss Henry, but we're also cognizant of the fact that usually a trio makes for sometimes a more entertaining hour or so that people spend with us, and because we appreciate them taking the time to download and listen and whatever they're doing, and but three minds, I think, coming from three different sides, I think is just a more enriching experience for the listeners, and I think Don agrees as well. And we don't know if Henry will come back, but and hopefully we do. But again, the project that he's doing right now it's paramount. It's monumental. He needs that time. Dennis, we've always had some great feedback, when you're on our show, and it just kind of helps complete the mission as far as I'm concerned.
Well, thank you.
Your internet's lagging out on
It's
me.
always good to be with you, fellas.
There he is.
Background here.
It got back up. So last week, Dennis, we talked about the setup, the logistics, and the first attack on Wake Island. So this week we're going to kind of pick it up there on the second attack. But I figured today's December 11th, as we're recording this. Hello? I had some audio coming in through there.
Yes, sir.
So as we're recording this is December 11th, but most people will be listening to the episode on December 12th. So I thought, even though this is technically part of the first part of Attack, we'll roll back a little bit to December 12th. So just to rewind a little bit, kind of like when you watch that next episode of the sitcom, they kind of give you a preview of what happened on a previous episode. So we're going to go there. The next day, December 12th, 1941, began with the bombing raid by a Type 97 Mavis, which was shot down by a Wildcat. Later in the day, 26 G-32M Neals attacked. The Wake defenders shot down one Nell and damaged four more. News of the battle reached the United States mainland, which unfortunately broadcast news reports that the garrison on Wake Island was, quote, very small. On Wake, they could hear the broadcast, which was a bit of disconcerting that their size was now revealed to the enemy and that there was no resupply yet. A Wake resupply mission was under planning but was held back by the lack of available ships due to the Pearl Harbor attack. Finally, the Navy War Planning Office made a breakthrough. They realized that if they converted the seaplane tender and that the people on Wake took no possessions, they could squeeze everyone into it, even 1,500 people. So that was kind of which way they were going before they could get anything off the ground, if you will. And so that's going to bring us to about December 23rd, because there was a span of about 12 days that was just 15 days from the first attack before the second attack on December 23rd, where it was just nonstop air raids and bombing, which in and of itself, we kind of talked about last week, Jeff. We often wondered what it was like on Peleliu and Tarawa pre-invasion for the Japanese, who dealt with days and hours on end of just naval barrages, but our guys on Wake Island kind of suffered that from both aerial and naval ships.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's important to kind of point out that at this time, though, if we go back, like you said, we kind of talked a little bit on last episode last week, initially it was victorious. And I think I told Dennis this earlier when I talked, that anytime I kind of revisit the story of Wake, you kind of get this false sense of hope that they're going to make it, because it was such an incredible, the way they repelled the Japanese on that first invasion. I'm sure the Japanese were just absolutely appalled to see was a destroyer, I think, that was sunk within minutes. And
yeah, two of them within two. One destroyer within 2 minutes of the opening battle. And as we discussed last week, 2 minutes of the opening battle on what they thought to be an unprotected island, but they just won their attack on Pearl Harbor and Guam, the Philippines, 19 other locations if you count the other two. So there's 23 locations that they attacked and were victorious over, not counting Wake. They go to Wake and they lose a destroyer within 2 minutes of fighting some Marines and construction workers and a few sailors. Just
right. And so, I think it's important to kind of ponder a little bit here. Was there a conversation had with the Japanese brass saying, okay, at what point do we pull the plug on this thing and just kind of bypass? I mean, we understand the strategic importance of Wake and Wilkes and Peel, right?
Yep.
Had a runway. It's an unsinkable aircraft carrier, closer to Japan than it was to Hawaii. So,
but it still really gave you. It still gave you very important mileage on your bombers back then. I mean, even 500 miles is 500 miles closer to the target. I mean, that's less fuel. That's like you're saying, it's closer to Japan than it was Hawaii. But even for Japanese, it could have been a reasonable desire to have, because that's even closer. That's just another place to stage equipment and aircraft.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it was kind of the outer ring of defenses for us. I mean, that was the far ring,
yep.
And then Pearl was kind of that inner ring, protecting the West Coast. So, but I mean, yeah, the pummeling that they took from a small contingent of Marines on that first attack. So, it was technically at that time, it was the first victory by the Marine Corps in the Pacific. And I think that, along with basically everything else about Wake Island, gets overlooked. the first Marine Medal of Honor is on Wake. Where's the airfield named after him?
Yeah.
Right? Like, man, that's just, the story of Hammer and Hank, and I don't know if there's another story where the guy was such an incredible pilot, but he gets a Medal of Honor for what he does on the ground as a ground pounding Marine, and it kind of really, it really kind of draws back to that old Marine Corps, what's just drilled into them. They are a rifleman first and everything else second. Even for the boys flying Wildcats in VMF 211, Hammer and Hank Elrod proved that he was an outstanding pilot and showed that he could take a 100-pound wing bomb and knock out some Japanese ships and still be able to help coordinate and properly fire, bell-fed machine guns in active ground combat during an invasion. Where is that story?
And where's a lot of the stories? It would seem like the Pacific Alamo has got to be probably, if not proven, but one of the most complete tellings of what happened on Wake. Because even when you try to watch documentaries or stories on YouTube, most of them are 15 minutes. It's usually the quick talking points that was over 30 days and in and out. And Pacific Alamo, all three of us have it here. And there is, Jeff and I have talked in the past, we love the first person account of these stories because it really brings to light what these men were going through. And trying to find, here we go. Bear with me, I just want to read something here momentarily. So this is during the first wave attack and the bombings. All able Marines rushed to help the wounded. Master Sergeant Andrew Paskowitz, injured in the right leg by shrapnel, painfully hobbled around to the wounded and dying men at the airstrip and offered comfort. PFC Joseph E. Bohm pulled up to the airstrip in a truck in which to place the dead, but was not ready for what greeted him. Quote, "At the airport, I have never before or since have seen such devastation. Dismembered bodies everywhere, planes on fire, the smelt of burnt flesh, moaning, groaning, and suffering everywhere. I inevitably became sick and thought I will never stop throwing up." Bourne set aside his revulsion and helped others drag bodies to the truck. Some were so shredded by the Japanese bullets and bomb fragments that a man crumbled to pieces in their hands. Steam from the roasted bodies gagged Bourne, and one enlisted man's body contained so many bullet holes that they couldn't even grab a hold of him. They had to slide a mattress underneath his perforated remains and carry him to the truck in that manner. The carnage that just the bombing and the naval artillery caused before even Japanese Imperial Marines stepped foot on the island is just tremendous and insane. And as we talked about last week, not only do you have Marines there, and yes, this is the Marines, this particular group of Marines' first combat. It's our first real combat in World War II. But when you're going through training, you understand you're training for combat, you're training for war, and you understand at some point you may see the sort of gruesomeness, not that you can prepare yourself for that. But then when you consider amongst those 400 Marines, you got 1,400 civilian construction workers who never even fathomed that would be a possibility, let alone train for it, to be put in that situation. And just literally have... And the title is perfect for this book. It is The Alamo. There's no one's coming. You guys you're essentially out in the wilderness, surrounded by natives, and they're coming for you. And we just lost Dennis. Hopefully he'll come back in. But yeah, it's really rough to when you read it and try to put it through their eyes.
Yeah, Dennis, since you're right down there and close to what are your first thoughts when what do you think as far as the title of the book and just the title of the battle in of itself? Wake was really the Alamo of the Pacific.
Yeah, well, anybody that knows anything about the Alamo knows that it's not a good thing when your position is called the Alamo. and it means nobody's getting out alive. And but it also has a meaning that you're gonna stand and fight. Like you're not just gonna sit back and delay. It's gonna be to the last man. And yeah, that's what I just love that title. And what was that? Have you guys seen this book either? Given Up or Dead?
No, I've heard of
About
it, but I
Wake
have
Up,
not
about-
seen it.
So this one I read in like a day and a half. I just couldn't put it down. It's just riveting as well. But I remember watching the when I was a kid. That was one of the first World War II movies I saw, was the Wake Island battle, and just that feeling of you look out to sea and there's just nothing. There's nobody on the horizon coming to help you, and there isn't anybody ever going to come and help you. And then that there's that submarine, right, that leaves, and it's like, oh man, who gets picked?
Mm-hmm.
That's just tough. It's just tough. And then the civilians, it's like, man, I don't want to put me on the submarine. Why am I here? This is against the law for me to be here. And it's like, oh, that's rough. That is so rough.
And from the commanding standpoint, Jeff and I were talking about this before we went on the air. After the first air raid, they lost, what was it, 12 of the 16 aircraft? Or no, it was 9 of the 12?
Eight of
the 12.
Yeah.
They had 4 left. And Jeff and I were discussing one of the things that they had been promised far before the attack was this newfangled technology, this radar. We got this radar equipment here. It's getting ready to ship up. It's on the docks of Pearl Harbor. We're going to send it out your way. You'll be able to detect anything coming within miles and a 360-degree radius of the island. Don't worry. This technology, it's going to be a lifesaver. And it never showed up. So what did they have? They had a water tower with 2 Marines with binoculars. Gave them a 15-second heads up. And so now 80 aircrafts are destroyed. As they pointed out in the book, there's not a silver lining to being bombed, but where they kind of got lucky-ish is all the bombs struck all the planes in the exact same spot near the back of the fuselage. So none of the engines took any direct hit. And so now they had 8 halfway decent engines to try to cobble together and either A, use on one of these 4, or let's see if we can get a 5th one off the ground. But you're cut off. Your fuel dump got hit on day 1. It blew up. So what aviation fuel you have was not in the main dump. So you have a few, barrels sitting around. But you have 4 planes left with a 15-second heads up. What do? You can't exactly fly them around all day. You're going to spin through all your aviation fuel. You don't want your last 4 planes on the ground. And so Cunningham decided he's going to basically send up a plane first thing in the morning, plane in the afternoon, a plane around dinner time-ish, and then right at sundown, kind of the times of the days that he'd anticipate a bombing run or Navy coming in, and try to get lucky, but you have to do it without expending what vital fuel you still have left to do it. And every second those things are on the ground, there's potential to get hit again. But once again, what do? It's like you got to balance your resources.
Well, we had radar at Pearl Harbor too.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
you know what it is about newfangled technology. There's always promises they don't ever quite live up to. And so on, the second Japanese invasion force came on December 23rd, comprised mostly of the ships from the first attempt plus 1,500 Japanese Marines. Now, that doesn't really give you an idea of how much we're sending down their way, so let's break it down just a little bit. We got 2 carriers, 10 destroyers, 1 seaplane tender, 1 transport/mine layer, 1,500 troops, all coming down. And as Jeff said, you got your ass handed to you on the first wave. First time, at least in this war, Japan was dealt a loss. They're circling back around. Do we give up? Do we go back? Is it worth it? Well, we got all these vessels that just came back from their successful attacks on Pearl Harbor and all these other locations. Oh, and we hear this little news broadcast coming out of Hawaii talking about how small their defenses are there. So let's go back. And they sent, it's It's kind of like when you watch the remake of, what was it, the Ugly Eight or the Dirty Dozen or whatever, when they're just trying to protect that little small town, and you just have all these cowboys and banditos coming down and just boom, boom, attacking one after the next. And they all landed on the southern bank down by the airport and splintered off. And things got real rough real quick. The landing began at 2:35 after the preliminary bombardment of the Japanese landed at different points on the atoll. They were immediately faced by the resistance of the 3-inch guns manned by Lieutenant Robert Hanna. Let's talk about this too. So after the first attack and the 12 days, after the first attack and the bombing, you have these three guns which we discussed were taken off an old World War I destroyer. And doesn't take much to figure out that that's going to be a target of opportunity at the next bombing raid. And so you have these Marines and these civilians surviving these bombing raids out in the heat, out in the sun all day. Their nerves are shook. They're worn out. They're tired. And at night they're saying, okay, Jeff, you take a squad of 10 guys, go tear down that gun. Dennis, you take a squad of 5 guys, go to where that gun was, build a fake gun out of cardboard and steel pipes and fill some sandbags. Every night they were moving these 3 guns around, replacing them with decoys so that the next morning when the bombing strikes came in, every one of the decoys got hit. But that's how we were able to fight up during that 15-day period of nightly bombings. Those poor guys were dismantling those guns and moving them every single night or every other night to new positions. And oh, by the way, newly acquired positions that hadn't been previously bombed, it's like playing Battleship. Every day you got one more peg or blown out trees and craters, because there wasn't a whole hell of a lot of places to put this stuff to begin with, because Wake Island wasn't known for its lush jungle. And so they're constantly moving this stuff around and trying to cover it up with camouflage to save it as much as they could. And that in and of itself has to be taxing and bad on morale. Can't sleep during the day and you're up working all night.
Yeah, and I know it didn't take them long to figure out that you're not going to go sleep in the building.
No.
Because you may not wake up. So they're they're out there roughing it in the machine gun positions out along the beach. They're cuddling up with the coral because, yeah, like you were saying, if they're anywhere near the guns, the decoys, anything that resembles a structure, it's getting taken out in this second phase of this attack where it was strictly just an aerial bombardment for days on end. So, that's just, I mean, that documentary I watched, there was a guy, I'm trying to think of exactly how he worded it, but after spending so many nights out there by the runway, when he was taken prisoner and they put him inside one of the buildings, he said, I never realized how soft wood could be from sleeping on the coral, just unbelievable, just what these guys did.
And so at this stage in the war, the Japanese didn't have anything resembling what we had, which we hadn't even used yet, which were going to be, landing craft. And so the vessels that they had these 2 waves of their Imperial Marines on, that was so important to get these guys on the beach. They just ran them right into the beach and just offloaded. But during that time, they saw the guns, and the Japanese Marines bypassed the gun positions and they attacked the main airfield. Meanwhile, a company of Japanese Special Naval Landing Forces Marines landed on Wake Island. After heavy fighting, the Marines guarding the airfield retreated to the final line northeast of the airfield. A group of 100 SNLF Marines infiltrated the position and attacked it, causing the surrender of the island's garrison. The U.S. Marines lost 49 killed, 2 missing, and 49 wounded during the 15-day siege, while 3 U.S. Navy personnel and at least 70 civilians were killed, including 10 natives and 12 civilian wounded. 433 U.S. personnel were captured, and 98 of them were left on Wake Island to act as slave labor to do what the Japanese military needed done. And that in and of itself brings a whole other list of things to come up against the Japanese post the war.
Right, yeah, the fate of those 98. Jeff
and I were talking, so after the first attack, word gets back, hey, we're under attack. And we need to do something. We got to get something out there. So remind me again. So you had Cunningham and who was the other? Devereaux. And then who did we say got relieved?
Well, there had to be a fall guy for Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
Right? So Admiral Kimmel was sink pack at the time of the attack. And interestingly enough, I want to say that position was offered to Nimitz. And he turned it down because he was going to leapfrog several other admirals for sink pack, and he didn't want it to get it that way. That's crucial because, obviously, for those of you who know, when Nimitz became sink pack, his contribution to the war, his leadership style, his just everything about that man as a leader was just crucial. So had Nimitz accepted sink pack, then it'd be a whole different war. But it was offered to Kimmel, and Kimmel took it. But of course, Kimmel had to be the fall guy among several others after the attack at Pearl. It kind
of makes sense they'd make him the fall guy because on April 18th, 1941, Kimmel wrote to the CNO requesting additional resources for the base construction on Wake Island. And for the Marine Corps Defense Battalion to be stationed there as well. And so he was early in on Wake Island and, trying to get this thing done. And so he was involved with it early on. And he actually he's the one who came up with the plan. I think it was Carrier Force 14 and 11 to go out there, leave California, stop at Pearl Harbor, get resupplied, get that gosh darn radar system to take out there and get some more supplies. And I think they made it to 500 to 300 miles away. And then as Jeff informed me, Kimmel lost his post and he had a replacement.
Right. Yeah, and that happened on the 17th of December. So 10 days after Pearl, Kimmel's relieved of command. And so this is the part that I found fascinating. Nimitz was due to be the next sink pack. And that's kind of usually how the story is told. Kimmel was relieved, Nimitz becomes sink pack, the rest is history. But there's a 14-day period in there that's not accounted for. Kimmel's relieved on the 17th. Nimitz takes over on the 31st of December. There's a middleman in there, and it was Admiral William S. Pye. And that's not all that interesting, except for the fact that what's happening in this 14-day period, the siege at the Pacific Alamo on Wake. So Pye's contribution as the ad hoc temporary sink pack until Nimitz gets there on the 31st when he's officially named sink pack. So Pye's he's handed the greatest loss in naval history. And, oh, by the way, every other bastion has been taken except for Wake. And Kimmel, like you said, was adamant in getting supplies out to Wake. In fact, I want to say, Dennis, you may know as well, the B-17s, right, the famous B-17s that were supposed to be that radar blip at Hawaii coming in to refuel, were they not heading to Wake? Was that their ultimate destination? It was either Wake or Midway, and I wasn't sure, but I thought maybe it was Wake.
I'm not sure.
But we can, Don can look that up. So either way, we've got 14 days in here that the entire, fate of the Pacific is handed to Vice Admiral William S. Pye. And Pye was not as much of an advocate at sending help to Wake that Kimmel was. So, your boss wants to do something, and now all of a sudden he's not your boss anymore, and you can go, well, I thought that was a dumb idea to begin with. I'm in charge now. Let's pull the plug.
Well, let's give him a little bit of credit. Is you also just lost half your naval fleet, and you're sending 2 carrier groups down there, making up probably 45 to 50% of what you have left. And you're like, is that worth the risk for that island super far away? Or should we take those valuable ships and protect our interests closer to our nation instead of risking them so far away? Because once they get out there, there's no one else coming to help them. So he also had to deal with that. Interesting fact, because you brought it up. What's the longest? How far can a B-17 bomber travel on a bombing run with fuel?
Well, the full load?
Mm-hmm. Just loosely.
Man. What's that?
Just loosely.
I want to say less than 2,000 miles.
Let's see here. With 2,810 U.S. gallons given in a range of about 2,000 miles. Guess how far Pearl Harbor was from Wake?
Oh.
Just about dead nuts 2,000 miles. So it was just far enough that we couldn't send any bombers out there or big B-17s. Even if someone floated that idea, maybe we can bomb some. No. We get to Wake, but we can't go any further. And once we're there, they don't have any fuel to fly us back anyhow. So it's like, well, that's out. They're just dead nuts at exactly 2,000 miles. And we saw what it took to get a B-24 Mitchell to fly off an aircraft carrier. Imagine trying to get a B-17 off of one. So that in and of itself wasn't an option either. And so, Robert Leckie talked about it in A Helmet for My Pillow on Guadalcanal when after George S. Elliott got sank and then the rest of the Navy pulled out, how the feeling of being left behind is so much more demoralizing than I volunteered to be here and I could possibly die. It's one thing to die for your cause and to die with your country behind you, but when you see everybody leaving you there, Wake Island, that they all had to have that same feeling, except for they didn't see their Navy turn tail, with the exception of the submarine and the plane that left with all the remaining Pan Am civilians.
Yeah, and I think I'd like to kind of touch on what you'd said earlier too about when you were when these guys were training for war, right, prior to 7 December. I have a hard time believing that, let's just say June of 1941, that we were really truly training for war. I don't know if we were training for war any more in June of 41 than we were in June of 01.
Sure.
Right? I mean, it's kind of those things that it's always imminent. It's always kind of back there, but it's it's not going to happen to me, or you know what I mean. Like I still feel, even with all of the tension going on in the world, and all of the failed appeasement and all the nonsense and the isolation policies, all the stuff from the 30s. That's just really just abysmally failed as far as American policy was concerned, and the Allies. I still find it hard to that when General Marshall was handed the Army as Chief of Staff, that there was this huge okay, we need really stepping up on recruitment. We need to invest in all this new stuff and all these new technologies. I just feel like that really wasn't quite there yet, and it took something like Pearl and Wake and Guam and the Philippines and all that to really kind of give us a kick in the seat of the pants and wake Uncle Sam up.
Yeah, and that's the thing. These weren't restrictions or financial cuts initiated by the military branches themselves. These were cuts made by the politicians in Washington post World War I and during the Depression and during the height of the isolationist. And so, yeah, it wasn't, we're in combat now, let's get new technology. It's, we're in war now, let's try to get our fighting strength back to what it should have been during peacetime before all these cuts, and then we'll work on getting the extra stuff. Henceforth, why we relied so heavily in those early years on World War I equipment, because our numbers were so greatly reduced after World War I, because the whole concept of war was so painful after the war to end all wars that no one wanted to even entertain the idea of maintaining a battle-ready armed forces, because after all, as the name implied, it was the war to end all wars, and people didn't have the stomach for it. And so we were so dramatically understaffed and technologically and manpower compared to where we should have been if it wouldn't have been from the laws and the financial cuts put towards our military.
Yeah, absolutely. The Marine Corps that those guys joined that were on Wake, that was a military that even in 1940, a year prior, Romania has a larger standing army than the United States in 1940. Dennis, I mean, let's as armchair historians now, could you even imagine being in any type of command position in 1941 where you get this news of Wake, Guam, and like Don said, 22, 23 different locations have all fallen under attack from the Empire of Japan? And then, oh, by the way, you know what? Let's just say Dennis Blocker. Dennis, you are now Admiral Pye. What do you do? Like Don said, I mean, do you risk two of the only three carriers we've got in the Pacific for the sake of 400 Marines, 1,100 civilians? I mean, either way is the wrong answer. Like, we know that, right? This is how command works. It's never really a good. It's bad, or it could have been worse, I guess. But what are your thoughts on all of that?
Well, I can't help but think that when you get to that level of command, there's a lot of politics involved. So you're probably a pretty good politician, and you have to know that history is being written, right? And you just saw what happened to the guy ahead of you, and you have to know that you are going to be written about, and history, American history, is being made, actively being made. And I just don't envy, like you said, that there was so many unknowns, and just to all of a sudden be handed the keys to the car and say, okay, here you go. Here, like, just, that's just crazy to even think about. Then there's also a part of me that says, shame on them, because it's not like the entire world was just suddenly thrust into war. War had been going on since September of 39 and for 1940 and 1941, and they saw the German juggernaut, and they saw what Japan could do in China, and just be so, and not, as a commander on Wake, I would have seen the writing on the wall, and I would have known, all right, I'm going to start training my guys. I don't care what the rest of the world, what the rest of the military is doing, and I'm going to use the resources that I have, and I'm going to make this as real as I can. I'm going to get my guys ready just in case something goes down, because any officer worth his salt is going to be reading. He's going to be reading books about prior battles. He's going to be reading the newspaper. He's going to be actively involved in what's going on in the world. He's going to be following Rommel's progress through Africa. He's going to be reading about what Montgomery is doing, and he's going to be following all these other fellows, and he's going to be looking at, this is like free education, right? He gets to learn from all these other people making these mistakes. So any officer worth his salt is going to be taking advantage of all of this stuff going on him, and then he's going to realize that, okay, look, you have to see the writing. You have to know it's a very good possibility that we are going to be drawn into this, so I need to get my guys ready.
And as we discussed last week, I think out of the plethora of the 1,145 civilian contractors, about 400 of them decided to participate. And as we discussed last week, it was a hard decision because the Marine commanders, Cunningham and Devereaux, they really couldn't force them to fight because, as Dennis implied earlier, legally they weren't supposed to be. They're not under contract with the military. If they fought with the military and then lost, they could have been executed as guerrillas because they weren't official members of the Marine Corps. And so 400 of them volunteered to learn how to use, the machine guns or help load the 3-inch guns. A lot more of them just did like sandbag, more construction stuff. But I was reading before the show prep tonight that during the second battle, you had the 400 of these 1,145 civilians, roughly about 400 of them spread across the island. And Cunningham later wrote in his diary that, Devereaux later on wrote in his diary that these civilians fought just as hard and just as strong, and he would have been more than pleased to refer to them as a Marine because they fought so strong. But some of the other enlisted Marines were wondering why we only have 400 of them. The rest of them are hiding in the quote unquote the brush. And I was reading one of the survivor civilians who were quote unquote in the brush. He said they were told, the 400 people who had the pre-training who already volunteered prior to the attack, when they all went to their battle stations, the rest of them were kind of, at least they claim, were told by whatever NCO, retreat to the brush, stand by. If we need reinforcements, we'll send for you. And no one ever sent for them. So a lot of people are saying, well, the ones who didn't actively fight were hiding like cowards. And a handful of them were like, we were doing what we were told. We were told to kind of fall back. You're going to be our reserves. Stay down, stay low. And, we'll come and grab people as we need to fill the lines. And no one ever came because they were, I guess, as a whole, they were so overwhelmed with the Japanese Imperial Marines that one of the articles I was reading, between the Marines, the Japanese Marines, and the bombardment, I guess the main communication lines to all the EE-8 field telephones and the other communication lines, they got hit with the shrapnels, the grenades, the bomb. And so Devereaux's giving out all these commands, and no one responded. And so I guess during the height of the battle, instead of sending someone, hey, go check our communication lines, they just assumed everybody had been wiped out. And another theory I heard, whether it's true or not, I just saw it in another self-produced documentary. People claim that during the second wave, you got all this dust and fire and smoke, and it's hard to see. As Cunningham was looking out on the field of battle, he's just seeing Japanese flags all over the place. He's like, oh shit, we're being overrun and they're winning. These are all claimed landmarks. What he didn't realize is the Japanese had the tradition of what they call the good luck flags. Their family members signed their flags, and the Japanese soldiers would attach them to their rifles as they're charging. And so the hypothesis this person was talking about is he's looking out and seeing all these Japanese flags, thinking, oh, we're done. But it wasn't until after, okay, my guys aren't answering my calls. I'm seeing Japanese flags all over the place. Clearly we've been overran and there's no one left. Let's go ahead and call this thing off and try to maintain what we have left. And it wasn't until the smoke cleared and you start looking around seeing there's a lot more Japanese bodies laying around than there were Marines and civilians, that some people claim that things were going a little bit better for us than we thought prior to our surrendering, but due to the lack of communications and seeing all these good luck flags flying around in the smoke and all that they thought we were losing quicker than we did. And that some people claim that's what led to a speedier surrender than if we would have had communication lines and actually hear what's going on at these little outposts and hear, losses versus casualties and all that. So it's hard to know, but that's another one of the stories that's been put out there. It's just,
Yeah, I read that too. Yeah, they so there's a unit of Marines there. They were shocked that they were surrendering. Like, we're kicking their butts. Like, what? Why are we? And it was that communications. Communications was down, and they had no way to tell anybody that we're actually doing some pretty awesome work here. But yeah, that's rough. I don't know if you guys have ever been in a situation where you thought for sure you were going to die.
No.
And you had to make a decision on, do I carry on or I know Jeff has. And then, of course, there's that famous scene from Band of Brothers with Spears looking at Private Blythe. But I very specifically remember, and it's interesting, Jeff, you mentioned June of 01 was anybody training. I was in boot camp at Fort Lust in the Woods and Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri in June of 01. And I was in basic infantry training, and I'm going to be going to AIT to be a medic. And, there's no war. And I was 25, so I was an old man. And, there's all these 17 and 18-year-olds in Whatcah Woods. And I remember the drill sergeants, they were just losing their minds, and because these idiots, they were just not paying attention, weren't taking anything seriously. So the company commander called all of us, called everybody in, all the different platoons, and we go into this conference center, and the company commander comes in, and we'd never seen him before, and he's got this clipboard with post-it notes all over it, and he just tells all the sergeants, close the doors, close all the doors, turn the TVs off, this and that, right? So they jump, and we're all like, oh crap. And he looks at all of us, and there's like 250 of us in there, and he said, as of 0800 hours this morning, China has invaded Taiwan. Units of the 101st have already been deployed. The Pacific Fleet is currently engaged in active combat with China. And like he's listing like all this stuff, right? He's like, units in Korea are the infantry units in Korea have been deployed. They're in active combat. You all can consider yourselves graduated right now. Now here I am right now. I'm a historian. I've already know about what the ramifications of China invading Taiwan means for all of us poor schmucks sitting there. So I'm like, oh man, we're just speed bumps. Like we're gonna win, but it's gonna be 2-3 years from now. So I'm like, okay, I know. I'm just looking around at all this room of dead people, right? They're walking around. They have no idea they're dead. And it was really interesting because I had already, by that time, I had 3 years worked at trauma team at university. I had all that experience under my belt and had seen a lot of death by that time. And I just remember looking around and just, I was like, all right, well, I'm dead. So let's do this. Let's do the best we can. So we go back to our unit, right? And Drill Sergeant Sweetenberg comes up to me, and there's another guy. He was 25. We were both 25. He goes, Blogger. He goes, these privates have done lost their mind. He goes, you guys help me square these people away. I was like, Roger that, Drill Sergeant. So we were getting there. People forgot where their bunks were. They forgot where their room was. They were crying like, man, Block, I didn't sign up to this. I signed up for college money, and I thought I was gonna, and I was like, look, this is the real thing. Like, what did you think? But I was smart enough to look over at the other companies, and none of them were running around with their heads cut off like ours was, and I was like, okay. So anyway, it's a really interesting when you said that, Jeff, because no. In June of 01, no one was taking it seriously. The only difference was that in June of 01, Europe hadn't been in a combat for a year and a half. And I think that's kind of a big difference that the guys there. But I don't know how I got off onto that tangent, but sorry about that.
So
yeah, I mean, I just thinking about my personal experience June of 01 myself. Yeah, I was one of those 17, 18-year-old pickerwoods that you mentioned that had no clue about anything. And yeah, no, I mean, the whole September 11th thing happened that was so like, what? No. And then it was like, oh.
Yeah. This is not a drill.
That's super serious.
So I still feel like I know the tensions and our allies are already at war, like you said, in Europe, and China's already been gone through, and I still feel like the U.S. was like, it's probably going to happen. Well, probably soon. We'll deal with it then. Like I still. But then there were people like Kimmel that guy probably would have been an amazing leader had he not been a fall guy, right? I mean, we see that he had the forethought to ramp up the task force to come from California, right? He truly seemed like somebody was not going to leave a garrison behind. Yep. And we never did again, right? We never did that. We kind of had to pull out of Iron Bottom Sound, in the Solomons, but only to re-engage. It wasn't like we just left the Marines on Guadalcanal like, see ya, we're going to go to the next island. Obviously it wasn't like that. But, yeah, it's just December 7th, 1941, we hear FDR's voice. we think Pearl Harbor, Battleship Arizona, but I hope the last 2 episodes of our listeners, we've enriched them a little bit more. Because if you were one of those Marines on Wake, you would certainly want that name Wake to be remembered like say. And like Dennis said, that's not a good analogy. That's never a good thing if the position that you're in is called the Alamo. But these guys deserve it, and of course, those 98 civilians that did stay behind, become laborers, that were eventually all mass executed. Every single one of them, the 98 civilians that were kept behind to work, were all executed on Wake. And of course, the admiral that took over the garrison, the Japanese admiral, was hanged for war crimes, I believe, in June of '47, and that couldn't have come soon enough.
So let me just give the details to the audience on that real quick. On October 5th, 1943, American naval aircraft Lexington raided Wake. 2 days later, the Japanese Naval Command ordered the beheading of the American civilian workers who had caught stealing. He and 97 others had initially been kept to behead an American civilian worker who had been caught stealing. He, meaning the civilian worker, and 97 others had been initially kept to perform forced labor. Fearing the invasion, the Japanese commander ordered that all of them be killed. They were taken to the northern end of the island, blindfolded, and then executed with a machine gun. One of the prisoners, whose name has never been discovered, escaped, apparently returning to the site to carve the message 98 U.S. PW 510 1943 on a large coral rock near where the victims had been hastily buried in a mass grave. The unknown American was recaptured, and the Japanese commander personally beheaded him with his katana. The inscription on the rock can still be seen and is a Wake landmark. And they have a beautiful photo of the rock. And so, they max executed them because they knew that we were coming back to take over the island, and they wanted to do what they did at the time. And so... And
they were starving too.
Yeah.
The Japanese garrison by then were absolutely starving.
Yeah.
Not that that's a reason.
But
I think
prisoners are just another mouth to feed, so there is that.
Yeah.
And then this one out.
The Navy announces that Wake Island is probably captured by the enemy, and now it is disclosed that fewer than 400 Marines held Wake Island for at least 14 days against heavy Japanese attacks. The Marines had 12 fighter planes and a small quantity of weapons. They were commanded by a 38-year-old Marine Major, James P.S. Devereux. They sank 1 Japanese light cruiser and 3 destroyers. They held out against 13 raids.
And we want to thank each and every one of you for hanging out with us and supporting us on this episode of the What's the Scuttlebutt Podcast. And I thought, what better way to go out than the words of former Wake Island prisoner Norman Sampson.
I had, like the other guys, experienced a depression, and we had suffered through this dumb 4 years in Japan and China. And since we survived, we said, boy, we probably ought to try to make the best of it, all us that had survived. We want to make the best of it. Try to do something. Your life's too short.